If somehow you found yourself stopping on this video today, there's a chance that something inside you has already started to feel it, like something is shifting, not in a loud or dramatic way, more like a door that's been closed for a very long time, slowly beginning to open on its own. Lately, a lot of Sagittarius energy has been carrying this feeling of no longer fitting into the old rhythm of life anymore. The routines that once felt comfortable have started to feel a little too small. The same cycles, the same patterns, don't move your heart the way they used to. And what's interesting is, the closer we get to June, the stronger this energy seems to become. Some of you may be thinking about a new beginning. Some are starting to notice opportunities they may have overlooked before. And others are simply realizing they want more from life than the version they've been settling into. Not necessarily something bigger, just something that feels more alive. So if this message is already resonating with you, leave the words, "I'm ready for new energy," down in the comments, almost like a way of marking this moment together. And now, let's go a little deeper into the message these cards are opening up for Sagittarius. The first card opening up for Sagittarius here is the Tower card. But what's interesting is, this energy doesn't feel like the kind of dramatic collapse people usually associate with the Tower card. It feels more like sitting in your car for a long time, parked on the side of a familiar road, city lights stretching across the window, an old song playing softly through the radio, while somewhere deep down you already know you can't stay in this place much longer. There's something inside Sagittarius that's starting to lose patience with the old version of life. Not necessarily because it's terrible, but because it's become too familiar, too predictable, too much like a cycle you've lived through so many times, that even the small moments of happiness don't really move your heart the way they once did. And maybe the hardest part to explain is this: sometimes Sagittarius doesn't even fully know where they want to go next. They just know they don't want to stay here anymore. The Tower card in this reading feels like a strong wind finally moving through doors that have been shut for far too long. Not to destroy Sagittarius, but to shake loose the things that deep down you stopped truly belonging to a long time ago. For some people, that could look like a job where life has started to feel automatic. Waking up, working, answering messages, trying to finish everything on the list. Then falling asleep with the feeling that tomorrow will probably look exactly the same. And sometimes it's not even about a place or a situation. Sometimes it's an older version of yourself. A version that may have fit the past perfectly, but no longer fits the person Sagittarius is slowly becoming now. And that's what makes this energy feel so important. Because Sagittarius has always been a sign connected to movement, to roads not taken yet, to the feeling of wanting to see a different sky outside the same familiar window. To souls that start feeling restless when they stay in one place for too long. But sometimes, what keeps Sagittarius stuck isn't the circumstance itself. It's a hesitation that's harder to name. The Hanged Man card comes through right after that, like a quiet pause in the middle of all these inner shifts. It feels like staring out the window while driving through a city you've never seen before, and suddenly realizing how much of your life has been built around what felt safe instead of what actually made you feel alive. A lot of Sagittarius energy lately has been thinking about leaving. Not always leaving a physical place, but leaving a state of being. Leaving the feeling of always needing to be reasonable, always needing to stay in control, always trying to keep life manageable and contained. Because the tighter you hold on to an old version of stability, the more it can start to feel like you're drifting away from yourself. And the Hanged Man card doesn't pressure you to move immediately. It simply changes the angle. It makes Sagittarius look at life differently. And sometimes, a different perspective is enough to start shifting everything else. Maybe you've already been feeling that lately. Conversations that no longer reach you the same way. Places that once felt comforting now feeling strangely small. Plans that used to excite you starting to sound like old echoes repeating themselves. Not because Sagittarius has become difficult, but because something inside you is expanding. And when the soul begins to outgrow the cage it once lived in, even the things that used to fit perfectly can start feeling too small. The World card enters this reading like a very quiet sign that some kind of cycle is nearing its end. Not in a dramatic way. More like standing in an airport, watching your flight number appear on the screen, knowing you're about to leave somewhere familiar behind, even if you still don't fully know what's waiting on the other side. There's a very specific kind of restlessness around Sagittarius right now. Part of you wants to move forward. Part of you still wants to run back toward what feels safe. Part of you feels excited by the idea of a new door opening. And another part still fears losing what's familiar. And honestly, that may be the quiet tension Sagittarius has been carrying lately. Because sometimes the hardest thing to let go of isn't the past itself. It's the version of you that worked so hard to survive inside that past. But then the Eight of Wands card begins to appear near the end of this energy, like strong wind rushing down an empty highway in the middle of the night. And suddenly, there's movement again. Things don't feel completely frozen anymore. Life feels like it's slowly picking up speed somewhere in the background, even if Sagittarius still can't see the full picture yet. And maybe the first changes won't look huge at all. A new thought, an invitation, a sudden desire to go somewhere farther away, a quiet urge to try something you once pushed aside. Because sometimes, the biggest journeys begin with the smallest internal shift. And Sagittarius is starting to touch that shift now, not loudly, not dramatically, just a growing feeling that you can't keep sleeping inside the old version of yourself forever. And maybe that's where everything truly begins. And after such a long stretch of hearing nothing but silence inside yourself, Sagittarius is finally starting to feel movement returning again. Not all at once, not in some loud or dramatic way. It feels more like a city slowly lighting back up after a heavy rain. One window at a time glowing awake, cars beginning to move through the streets again, and somewhere deep inside you, something is slowly waking up too. The Wheel of Fortune card carries a very strange rhythm in this energy. Not the kind of sudden change that flips your entire life upside down overnight. It feels more like life quietly opening new pathways. After a season where Sagittarius had almost gotten used to feeling stuck, some people have spent too long living inside routines that no longer inspire them. The same days, the same conversations, the same roads. And at some point, Sagittarius may not have even realized when they stopped feeling excited about life in the first place. And honestly, that's the kind of exhaustion that runs the deepest, not because of pain, but because everything starts feeling emotionally flat. Like sitting on a train moving through the night, watching lights blur past the window, while deep down, you no longer feel certain you're actually heading anywhere meaningful. But lately, it feels like that small inner fire is starting to return, very gently. Maybe through a random idea that appears while driving alone at night. Maybe through a sudden urge to pack a bag and disappear somewhere for a few days. Maybe through one unexpected conversation that reminds Sagittarius the world outside is still so much bigger than the emotional room you've been trapped inside for too long. The Knight of Wands card comes through here like someone standing in the middle of an airport close to midnight, holding a boarding pass, heart beating fast, still not fully knowing where the journey will lead, but for the first time in a very long time, feeling ready to move again. And that's what's changing inside Sagittarius now. No longer wanting to simply exist. No longer wanting to move through life emotionally half awake. Something inside you is reaching for experiences that feel alive again. New places, new people, new versions of yourself. And what's beautiful about this energy is, Sagittarius doesn't need to see the entire road yet. Because sometimes the strongest momentum appears the moment we stop trying to control every outcome. The Ace of Wands card feels like a spark reigniting after a long season of emotional dust settling over the soul. Not loud, not overly dramatic, but enough to remind Sagittarius what it once felt like to truly love life, to want to explore everything, to feel moved by small moments again, to believe there was always another horizon waiting somewhere ahead. And maybe the past season caused Sagittarius to pull inward more than usual. A few disappointments, a few attempts that never fully went anywhere, a few periods where life felt frozen in place. And when that feeling lasts too long, people can start forgetting what hope even feels like when it's moving again. But this energy doesn't feel like pressure to suddenly be positive. It feels more like finally taking a full breath after walking out of a suffocating room, like rolling down the car window late at night, letting cold air rush in, and suddenly realizing you still want to keep going farther. The Eight of Wands card keeps speeding everything up from here. Thoughts begin shifting faster. Small opportunities start appearing more often. Invitations, conversations, passing ideas. Little moments that quietly make Sagittarius think, maybe I don't have to keep living the old way anymore. And sometimes, a new life doesn't begin with one huge decision. Sometimes it begins the moment your spirit stops returning to things that lost emotional meaning a long time ago. Sagittarius may start paying closer attention now to the places that actually bring energy back into the soul. The people who inspire something real inside you. The experiences that move your heart instead of simply keeping your mind distracted. Because once the energy inside begins to shift, life outside slowly starts responding to that rhythm too. And maybe the most beautiful thing about Sagittarius is this: no matter how tired this sign becomes, there is always some part of it that never fully gives up on the possibility of a wider horizon. A part that still believes there's something out there worth setting out for again. And maybe Sagittarius is getting very close to the moment that inner door begins opening again, not only toward life itself, but toward new connections, new people, and emotions you may have once believed you were no longer waiting for anymore. And somewhere in the middle of all this momentum beginning to build, Sagittarius starts noticing something unexpected. The more open you become toward the outside world, the more life seems to place new doors in front of you. Not all of them arrive as huge life-changing moments. Sometimes it's just a short conversation that lingers in your mind for hours afterward. A simple invitation that somehow feels meaningful. A new place you stumble into by accident. A person appearing at the exact moment your heart finally stopped closing itself off. The Page of Cups card enters this energy softly, almost like music playing quietly inside a small late-night cafe somewhere in the city. Not loud, not trying to pull attention toward itself, but enough to make the Sagittarius heart, silent for far too long, begin feeling emotionally awake again in a very human way. There are seasons in life where people stay in survival mode for too long, where they stop expecting real connection, where they stop believing anyone could truly understand the deeper parts of who they are. And Sagittarius, even with all its freedom and movement, gets tired too. Tired of always having to stay strong, tired of dragging yourself out of dark places alone, tired of opening your heart only to end up back inside the same familiar loneliness again. So maybe lately, you've learned to keep a little more distance from your emotions, not fully shutting your heart down, just no longer rushing toward people the way you once did. But this energy feels different from the shallow connections that simply pass through your life and disappear. It feels more like standing inside a crowded airport in a city you've never been to before, surrounded by strangers, yet somehow catching one glance across the room that makes you feel a little less alone. The Page of Pentacles card appears here like a small but meaningful sign that new doors are slowly beginning to open. Some Sagittarius energy may start stepping into new environments now, new communities, new circles of people carrying a similar frequency, conversations that leave your mind feeling expanded instead of emotionally drained. And maybe the most beautiful part of all this is that these connections don't require Sagittarius to become someone else in order to belong. There's no pressure to force yourself to fit in, no pressure to prove your worth. It's more like, the closer you move toward the right energy, the more you begin returning to yourself again. There's a very specific kind of connection surrounding this reading. It doesn't arrive intensely right away. But the more you talk, the more you share, the more you walk beside certain people, the more it feels like stepping out of a room you stayed trapped inside for far too long. The Three of Wands card expands this entire energy outward like a cinematic wide shot near the ocean just before sunrise. Strong wind moving through the air, distant city lights glowing far away. And for the first time in a long time, the future no longer feels unreachable. Sagittarius begins looking at life differently now. Not just thinking about surviving each day, but thinking about how you actually want to live, where you want to go, who you want beside you. What kind of energy you truly want surrounding your life. And sometimes, that's the real beginning of a new journey, not when everything changes overnight, but when the soul finally allows itself to imagine a life bigger than the one it's currently living. The Ten of Cups card carries such a warm feeling near the end of this energy, not perfect happiness, not a flawless fantasy, more like sitting beside the right people, in the right place, as the most honest version of yourself. After spending so much time trying to adapt to spaces that no longer felt aligned, Sagittarius may finally begin feeling that there are still connections in this world where breathing comes naturally. People who don't make you shrink yourself. Places that don't make your spirit feel heavy. Conversations that do more than fill silence. They leave your heart feeling lighter afterward. And maybe that's why this energy feels so expansive now. Because Sagittarius isn't only moving closer toward new opportunities. You're moving closer toward new emotional versions of yourself too. A version that's less guarded, less exhausted, less focused on survival. It feels like after an incredibly long journey, you're finally beginning to see the lights of the place your soul truly wants to rest, even if it's still very far away. And maybe the most beautiful part is this. When the heart starts opening itself back up to people again, it also opens itself to emotions. Sagittarius once thought it had forgotten how to feel. And maybe that's where this story begins going even deeper. Maybe the biggest shift happening inside Sagittarius right now isn't really about what's changing on the outside. It's about the way you're beginning to see things more clearly. The Star card comes through in this energy like a wide open sky after a long overnight journey. The noise has settled down. The chaos from the earlier chapters doesn't feel as loud anymore. There's just this deep stillness now, quiet enough for Sagittarius to finally hear their own thoughts clearly again. There are moments in life when people become so focused on moving forward, they forget to stop and ask themselves, where am I actually going? Sagittarius is naturally connected to movement, to continuing forward, to searching for new experiences, to always feeling like there's another road waiting ahead. But sometimes, moving nonstop can exhaust the soul too, like sitting on a long flight, watching clouds drift past outside the window, and suddenly realizing you've been carrying things that no longer belong in your present life anymore. The Star card carries a very gentle kind of clarity here. Not a dramatic awakening that flips everything upside down, more like slowly realizing what truly nourishes your spirit and what has quietly been draining your energy every single day. There were places Sagittarius once believed they had to stay attached to, people you tried hard to understand, goals that pushed you to run farther and farther, until one day something inside quietly asked, what if I reach it and still feel empty? And usually, that's the moment life begins changing direction. Not loudly, but honestly. The Justice card enters this energy, like the soul finally sitting down face to face with itself after spending a long time avoiding its real emotions. It doesn't feel judgmental, it feels balanced. Like Sagittarius is finally stopping the habit of making excuses for the things that leave you exhausted. Finally looking directly at the relationships that make your heart feel heavy, the habits that make you smaller, the routines that slowly drain the inspiration out of life. And what feels different this time is that Sagittarius no longer wants to keep saying, I'll just tolerate it a little longer. Something inside you is beginning to want a more honest life emotionally. Not to fight anyone, not to prove anything, just to stop betraying yourself in small, quiet ways. The Seven of Swords card appears here almost like a sharpened intuition, like walking into a room and immediately sensing which energy doesn't truly align with you anymore. Sagittarius is starting to notice things you may have overlooked before, words that no longer match actions, connections that only survive when you become a different version of yourself, places that always make you feel like you have to tense up just to belong there. And the clearer everything becomes, the less Sagittarius wants to return to the old way of living, not out of anger, but because your inner world has started maturing in a completely different direction now. There's a certain kind of growth that happens when people stop chasing every open door and finally choose the one that actually feels right for them. The Five of Cups card carries a deep sadness through part of this energy, not hopeless sadness, more like grieving older versions of yourself, grieving the years spent trying to hold on to things that no longer fit your spirit, grieving the moments Sagittarius made their heart smaller just to feel accepted somewhere, grieving the journeys that carried you so far, but somehow never brought you closer to yourself. And sometimes, before people can fully recognize the right path ahead, they first have to become quiet enough to admit that certain roads were never meant to continue with them forever. But the beautiful thing about this energy is that Sagittarius no longer sees endings as something unbearably heavy. You're beginning to understand that not every closed door is a loss. Some doors close simply to create enough space for the soul to move towards something wider. Out there, the city lights are still glowing. Late-night buses are still moving through long, empty roads. Airports are still full of people carrying hope towards someplace new. And Sagittarius is no different. Maybe you still don't fully know what the next destination looks like yet, but at least now, you no longer want to return to the places that dimmed your inner light. And the Star card is still there, far away in the night sky, not blinding, not overwhelming, just bright enough to guide people who have spent too long living inside uncertainty. And maybe, as Sagittarius becomes clearer about what truly matters, your heart slowly begins opening again toward the kinds of connections that can actually reach the most honest parts of who you are. Not the kind of connection that makes you want to run, but the kind that makes you want to stay a little longer and really feel it. Maybe the most beautiful part of this energy right now is that Sagittarius is beginning to remember what hope feels like again. Not huge, unreachable hope, not the kind that feels unrealistic or far away. More like a very small feeling, a very human feeling, where the soul finally stops looking at the future through exhausted eyes. The Temperance card comes through here like a soft wind after a long journey through too much noise. It doesn't pressure Sagittarius to move faster. It doesn't demand that everything change overnight. It simply brings the inner world back toward balance, so new doors can begin opening in the most natural way possible. There are seasons in life where people lose touch with themselves because they've spent too long trying to live inside versions that other people needed from them, trying to be the strong one, trying to be the person who never slows down. trying to hold everything together even when they've already been emotionally exhausted for a very long time. And Sagittarius, even with all its freedom and fire, has gone through moments like that too. But now, something inside you seems to want a different pace. Not just running away from the old life anymore, but slowly moving toward the things that genuinely make your spirit feel wider again. The Ace of Pentacles card appears here like a softly lit doorway at the end of a very long hallway. Not loud, not some sudden miracle. More like the feeling of someone who spent years feeling lost, finally catching sight of a place they truly want to arrive at. Maybe it's an idea Sagittarius once abandoned, an old dream quietly returning to the mind again. A path that once stirred something deep inside you before fear convinced you not to walk toward it. Or maybe it's simply this growing feeling that you want to live differently now. And what's interesting is, once the inner world begins changing, the outer world quietly starts responding too. Opportunities begin arriving at better moments. Conversations feel more inspiring. Places that once felt unfamiliar suddenly feel worth exploring. It's almost like life itself is slowly expanding outward again. The Seven of Cups card gives this whole energy such a cinematic feeling. Like someone sitting beside the window on a bus moving through the city before sunrise, streetlights stretching into blurred lines outside the glass, while old dreams begin slowly waking back up inside their mind. There are dreams Sagittarius once believed they had become too realistic to keep believing in anymore. Versions of life that got pushed aside because of responsibility. Desires that once felt impractical. But the closer you move toward this new chapter, the more it feels like your soul no longer wants to live inside a life that's too small. No longer wanting to survive inside safe emotional loops forever. No longer wanting to keep postponing the things that still make your heart feel alive. And sometimes, the greatest form of expansion has nothing to do with how far away you travel. Sometimes it's simply Sagittarius finally allowing yourself to believe you deserve a life where your spirit can breathe freely. The Ten of Cups card appears near the end of this energy, like the warm light from a quiet house seen in the distance during a long journey home. Not perfection, not fantasy, just peace. A place where people no longer feel pressured to become someone else in order to belong. After all the movement, all the changes, all the moments where Sagittarius had to pull themselves out of darkness alone, something inside you is beginning to understand this. Happiness isn't always hidden at the farthest destination. Sometimes it's found in becoming more honest with yourself, little by little each day. Doing things that bring light back into your heart. Being around people who don't make your spirit shrink. Walking forward without feeling like you have to leave pieces of yourself behind anymore. And maybe that's why this energy feels so wide open now. Because Sagittarius isn't only standing at the beginning of a new chapter in life. You're standing in front of a new version of yourself too. One that finally feels ready to step beyond the old limitations you once thought would hold you forever. Out there, the sky is still wide. Late night flights are still taking off. Long roads are still leading toward places Sagittarius can't fully imagine yet. But this time, something inside you feels different. Not just wanting to escape the feeling of being stuck anymore, but genuinely wanting to move toward the life your soul has been reaching for all along. And maybe this is the moment the real journey finally begins. And maybe that's what Sagittarius is slowly learning again in this season of life. That not every road needs to reveal the final destination before it becomes worth walking. Some journeys only begin when a person becomes brave enough to leave behind an older version of themselves, to leave behind what once felt familiar, to step beyond the limits that once made them believe, maybe this is as far as my life goes. But Sagittarius was never truly meant for spaces that were too small. Even during the seasons when you felt exhausted. Even during the moments when part of you wanted to stop trying altogether. Even during the periods where the soul almost lost its motivation to keep searching for something new, there was still always a part of you quietly looking toward a wider sky. And lately, it feels like that part is beginning to wake up again, not dramatically, just through very small moments, like staring out the window at city lights one evening and suddenly thinking, maybe I still want to go farther. Or hearing someone mention a place you've never been before, and feeling something shift inside you that you can't completely explain yet. Or feeling this quiet urge to change something about your life, even if Sagittarius still doesn't fully understand why. But sometimes, the soul understands long before the mind catches up. And maybe this journey isn't arriving to make life perfect. Maybe it's simply here to remind Sagittarius, there are still so many unopened doors ahead of you. So many versions of yourself you haven't met yet. So many emotions still waiting to be fully lived. So if lately you've felt caught between the old life and the new one, between staying where you are or finally moving forward, Maybe you're not as lost as you think. Maybe your inner world is simply preparing itself for a chapter that feels wider than the last one. And maybe, someday when Sagittarius looks back on this period of life, you'll realize this was the moment the fire inside you slowly began glowing again. And if this message feels close to your heart right now, leave the words, "I'm ready to move forward," down in the comments. And as always, thank you, Sagittarius, for being here, for staying a little longer, and for walking through this journey with me.